We're live.
Woo! Okay, well, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us. We're having a very important discussion on getting the best co-parenting plan in your divorce process. So whether you're going through a divorce or separation, navigating co-parenting can be a very challenging and emotional journey, to say the least. So that's why we're here today to share valuable insights and expert advice on how to create a co-parenting plan that works for you and your family. And we're Lila, Heather, Jody, and Lindsay at Split.fyi. And we're not only years of professional experience, but we also bring the knowledge of our community to the table. So together we're going to explore topics such as communication, schedules, boundaries, and much more to help you navigate this often very challenging process with hopefully some confidence and grace. Hi, guys.
Hi.
So where should we begin?
This is always one of my favorite, topics where you can make, some really great decisions and some really poor decisions, particularly for those people who are transitioning from being possibly a full-time stay-at-home parent and then having to do some co-parenting and custody sharing. So there are a lot of different nuances in that space, as well as just throughout the life of your child. If you start out divorced with young children, just that evolutionary path that happens. So I actually always enjoy working with people and talking to people in order to sort of decode and demystify some of these things, because you weren't, for the most part, thinking, oh, I'm going to be, a full-time parent to now a part-time parent. Even if you were sharing a lot of the child care in your household, it still is different when it's solo versus together under same roof. So one thing I will say, maybe we round robin on number one piece of advice: be flexible, stay flexible. You're going to need changes. They're going to need changes, and be gracious about doing that throughout the life of your children. It de-stresses your children thinking that they're not going, that they're not causing more strife for their parents if you guys remain flexible around the schedules in your children's lives.
Mm-hmm. And so with that, that's a very interesting discussion, because often it comes up in our community and saying, well, how flexible should I be? Because I do need to set boundaries, right? So, and there is a dance between those, because obviously you don't, and often people feel been taken advantage of. I have to change my schedule around. So, all the time to accommodate, and that's not fair. And it comes up quite a bit. And it's always being cognizant of your own schedule and how important that is. And it's not saying concede to every single flexibility. To your point, it's just being able, if you can, to move things around, right? So that when you need it, it happens, but not constantly, not if it's disrupting your own schedule. Don't go out of your way to be doing it, right?
You're totally correct in that.
Yeah.
But don't let them take advantage of you. And it is setting the tone. And I will say early days, when you're starting just to navigate the first potential, like, oh, I need to swap conversation, don't just immediately say no, pause and go, okay, does this work for my life? And is it okay? And yes, I want to accommodate. So that is, but I 100% do not get railroaded in this, because you are setting the tone again in the early days for the rest, and setting expectations that, oh, you've always accommodated my schedule, so you're going to do it now. And it's like, not always, relationship dynamics change, your work schedule might change. There's all sorts of things that happen along the way that, just require respect and boundaries.
Exactly. I mean, and with that, the boundaries are very important. So it's also looking at your own, needs and desires and wants as well, and factoring that in when you are creating a co-parenting plan, right? It's obviously there's a give and take, but it's understanding. And what you said earlier, Heather, and this is the hardest bit, is when you are deciding to, okay, this is going to happen. We're going to have to create a co-parenting plan. Now, giving up that time with your children very difficult to get your head around it, right? So a lot of times it feels like a threat. It feels like, well, wait a minute, I don't get to have this, I don't get to do that. So it's giving up and understanding and getting your head around the sheer fact that you're not going to be with your children 100% of the time, right? And it's going to, and understanding that that's okay too, because the time that you are with your children, you get to be with them completely, right? So we often talk about this. It's like, yes, there's a little bit of a give and take, but then when you get them, you get to do whatever you want with them and you're one-on-one with them. So there's something in that.
A lot of times the level of presence that both parents bring to the post-separation parenting time goes up, which is a little bit, it's a little bit shocking for the one that the person wasn't around very often, right? And then suddenly you're like, oh, great, they're stepping up now. And somehow they're able to do these things they didn't do historically. And that's not a bad thing. Like it's, and it's a little bit hurtful to the person that was maybe doing all the caretaking, but it's good for the children to have both parents be as present as possible. And I will say that, when I was in this situation, I was a full-time stay-at-home mom. And when I came around, when it was my days, I wasn't doing all the other things that I would normally be multitasking on top of their lives. I was actually like, oh, I can do that on my days that they aren't with me. And therefore I even was way more present with them, which I had to assume hopefully their dad was as well. And so, that was hard, but very eye-opening to me. I was like, oh, okay. It's good that both parents are, raise their level of presence if they can, and they do.
Yeah, I was just thinking what you're talking about, Heather, we were saying like, hopefully when they're with their dad, right? So I think that's something that we see from our community often is the concern of what is happening, the lack of control when they go with the other parent, right? And there's concern that's happening. And I remember that my son said to me at one point, because I divorced after my children were of age, so we didn't have to do that co-parenting at a young age. My son did say to me later on, though, he said, even if you would have divorced when we were younger, who knows? Because yes, we would have had to go see our dad, but coming back to you, we would have always known would have been the stable home. Like we would have had complete stability with you. Yes, may have the train been off the track when we went to our dad's, but it wouldn't have been an in-between kind of thing like we had when you were still married, trying to figure it out. We would have known straight above the board when we were with you, it was completely stable. So I thought that was interesting. And I think we should speak to our community, especially our community has some young moms that are having a really, really hard time giving that time to that co-parent.
Yes.
Yeah. I think when they are young, it is very difficult. And there are some just general realities of what moms provide versus dads provide in those really young years. And it's very, particularly, we have some nursing moms, we have, some, other special circumstance, a wide range of ages within, a custody situation. And it is important to kind of evolve your plan throughout the years. And it might be that those early days, you have an infant, it's going to be that you're going to see each other every day. It's going to be a few hours a day to have a bath time or a meal or whatever. And those are hard for people because honestly, like seeing your soon to be ex or your ex, particularly while you're going through a divorce during those custody times is very challenging. And for the child, we always say, love your children more than you hate your ex. For your child, it's important for them to stay bonded so that as the parenting time naturally progresses to whatever state you end up in, whether it's 50-50 or 70-30, 60-40, whatever it is, that they have trust and comfort with that other adult, right? So withholding your child doesn't do him or her any favors by not allowing that bonding to occur.
And I love that. I think an important thing that you've shared, Heather, and I think for people that are going through this is the fear of once they set it in stone, that's it. That's how it's going to be. So I think you were speaking about the evolution of the plan, right? The plan can change and alter. And is that something that they need their attorney to help them with? Is that something that they can do with the co-parent? I mean, I'm sure all the there's nuances to all of it. But in general, like, how does that kind of play out for anybody that's watching us right now?
So my recommendation, I've got kind of 2 pro tips in this area. One is put an agreement in place that you'll go to mediation before you do anything else to manage your parenting schedules. It's less expensive, it's more timely, it's, less aggressive. But it is important because if you are changing a schedule, it can change potentially the child support and the amount of time someone is going to be having the kids. So that's really important. And then, and also if you are having co-parenting challenges, because we're talking a little bit about the parenting side of things, agree that you're going to go to a co-parenting specialist, like a therapist, before also blowing up and going to court. So that's, as kids get older, different parenting things arise. I have teenage girls now, and my ex and I had to cross some bridges across, both households and discipline and things like that. And we had a term in our agreement that we triggered, and it was the best thing ever for us to do that rather than, come after each other. We were like, we have this child that we need to manage across both households, and therefore let's get some extra support to make it work for both of us and our daughter, right? So I would say definitely start and put that clause in your settlement agreement if you haven't already, that says that you will go down some alternative paths before just going straight up and going to court. And that also allows you to hopefully not allow your children, or to allow them in a safer environment than having to get minors counsel and everything else that I've seen that can be pretty ugly.
Yeah. And it's also, so they're not defaulting to the court to make decisions on the behalf of your children. And I think that the court's temperament is such that if it's such early days that they're making these agreements in the court order, that the parents will work together to decide the future contact order, right? So, I mean, and it's in its best interest, because to your point, how the things change. Kids grow up, they have different schedules, they start sports, they do this, they do that. And I mean, and things really have to be a workaround around your children. Kid first. That's the hardest thing to remember, that it is the kids first,
And I love that we say that, right? And that all sounds so great. This is what we're sharing. We've heard the reality of the stories though, right? So we've got one parent that is just like so difficult to handle. So maybe we can share some tips, like from what we've seen from our community and things that we've had to share that have gotten them over the hump of having to deal with a very difficult co-parent, if they're even co-parenting.
So, well, before that, what's interesting is, and I really wanted to just finish up this whole notion of also that difficulty of, not having your kids during that time, because I really would love to hear Lindsay's behalf of it, because Lindsay, you can share your story, but you've had, the opposite. And it's a lot, because now the responsibility lands on you and there is no break. So sometimes, because we always think, well, that'd be great, but actually we do, as parents, and we're full on, we need some time to ourselves, right? So I really wanted to touch on that aspect of it, so people can understand that, that time for yourself is needed. So you're a better parent when you're showing up for your kids as well, right?
Right. I mean, I was so scared to give up time because, like Heather, I was a full-time stay-at-home mom, and all of a sudden I was thrown into giving up, every other weekend and some time during the week. And I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get through this time away. I'd never, even when he was a baby, been apart from him on a vacation or anything. So it was totally brand new to me. And I'm like, how am I going to get through this? But I filled my time. I had to get back into the workforce, and that definitely filled some of my schedule, and, hanging out with friends that I hadn't hung out with in a long time, and just taking that time to really focus on myself, that as a stay-at-home parent, you really don't do it. And suddenly you have this opportunity. So what originally I thought was going to be horrible, and it was still hard, actually ended up helping in my healing process, because it did give me that time for myself to really to work on my healing when he was with his dad. So
and I think that there's with that, and I experienced to a certain degree something similar, but I know that it's the fear. It's the fear of, missing out on something for your, child's growth process. And it's like, and remember, it's like, actually, in reality, as they're growing up, you aren't going to be with them all the time. They're going to go to school. They're going to go to their friend's house. They're not going to want to be with you. There's all these stages of things that it shouldn't be so different. And I think that fear, or the fear of losing them to the other parent, I mean, that comes up a lot in our community as well. And it's, the reality is, and we say this a lot, is you provide for your kids that loving, trusting space. That's what they will always know, and that's what they will always come back to. So no matter what, this is not a competition, right? It's just provide that loving space for them so that you're not in fear that you're going to lose them or they're going to go off, So that's an important thing to think of when you're having to release some time or, give up some time with your children.
So some of the ways you mitigated the fear during that time, Lindsay, was you went back to work, right? You spent time with friends. I think we've talked about a lot of self-care too, right? This is the time for you to take that bath that you never could take, where the kids are screaming and knocking on the door. There's time for you to take the boxing class to get out some of the aggression that you're feeling towards this whole situation. So it's just filling the time sounds like it's really important, and doing things that are good for you to move you forward.
Mm-hmm. And don't forget, there's going to come a time when you're going to start dating again, right? And you're going to want those weekends free. I mean, it's just a reality that your life is going to go on, and that gives you the opportunity to have that life.
Right. Creating the balance is essential. But I think, getting over the fear is very important, and trying to, realize that your kid is your kid. Like, they're going to love you, and you provide love and support and a space for them. It doesn't have to be 24 hours around the clock, 7 days a week. And in fact, sometimes when that's the case, there's a burnout on all of us have for everything, right? We can never be our best if we're constantly outputting and constantly giving to somebody else, right? So very important to recognize that and try not to be in that fear mode.
That's true. And also, there's sometimes some guilt that comes with that, and that enjoyment factor of having that little bit of time to yourself that you didn't used to have. And all of us will say, ditch that right away.
No guilt.
Well, it's because I think we're feeling it while we're going through this divorce, while we're having this horrible situation. Because if we were still married and taking that time for ourselves, I highly doubt we would be thinking that, right? We'd be like, oh, good, they're with their dad, I need a break, da, da, da. But since you're divorcing their dad or divorcing their mom, it shifts that dynamic.
Yes, it does. I do think we should spend a few minutes talking about the tactical sides of creating the custody plan, because we get a lot of questions around 2252, week on, week off, specified age things, like how do you manage holidays, all of that. So I will tell you, from kids who are about 5 to 14-ish, a best practice is considered to do that 2-5 during the school year, and then during the summer to do one week on and 1 week off. And the concept, and this works usually pretty well in, or even better actually, with higher conflict people, because during the school year, the kids know from a predictability standpoint, okay, great, Mondays and Tuesdays, I'm with parent X, Wednesdays and Thursdays, I'm with parent Y, and then it's every other weekend that I'm talking 50-50 schedules here. And I mean, you can slide them a little bit, but it's just, if you're I'm learning more and more states their default is 50-50. Or two of us happen to be in California. That's not currently the case. It's a little bit of the temperature of the court, but not by law. So when you're looking at that, so during the summer, that makes it during school year, that makes it a little bit more predictable on school days. That's just how our minds operate. Now, during the summer, because a lot of kids have sports camps, day camps, summer camps, whatever, so that you're not having to negotiate with your spouse how it is that you're going to get the daycare or the child care coverage or your travel for your summer plans, blocking out 1 week on, 1 week off, and potentially even doing 2 weeks if you feel comfortable with that is so much easier, because you get to decide, hey, I want to sign my kid up for a horse camp. I want to sign her up for a surfing camp, whatever happens to be the case. And then, or I'm just going to take the week off and I'm cool with that, so that you're not having to split the week up. And I've had parents that have signed their kids up for camps, agreed. And then the other parent's like, no, I don't really want to drive them out there. I'm just going to take the day off. And then the child is losing out on a couple of days at the camp and the full experience of it. And, you paid for something that you're not using and blah, blah, blah. So it's just, it's a little bit simpler to do that kind of schedule if you can manage the 1 week increments. And it does allow for some, ability to travel and some easier things when you have those longer breaks. So just as a kind of a baseline, I usually try to start conversations at that high level, and then we drill down into how are you managing, more of the spring breaks or family ski week or Thanksgiving.
I think an example that I'd like to share that I know someone did, and it actually hasn't worked to their benefit. So this is something that you might be thinking of that maybe you may not want to do. She had made the decision so she could have full summers with her children, that she would give up like full holidays per year. So like it'd be like he's got them for the Thanksgiving, for Christmas, and then and she has them all summer, and then it switches, and then she has them for all the Thanksgiving, and then he has them for the summer. It has killed her during the holidays. She thought she'd be fine, but she realized she's not getting them for anything. Thanksgiving, Christmas, it's just boom to boom to boom, right? And she thought she could handle it, but it was very difficult for her not to have them for all of those holidays. So I think in retrospect, she's looking at that differently.
No, 100%. I do recommend for the year, particularly if you're a Thanksgiving Christmas family, that it's 1 and 1. Like it's one gets them on the even years, one gets on, like you get Thanksgiving, they get Christmas. So that for that reason, because that would be a really tough season to not have your kids for that whole period. Hopefully her is amenable to maybe.
They have some flexibility, which works. I just think she thought, because she wanted that full length so they could travel more in the summer. She was just trying to get more an extended time period with them. And she thought it has worked to that advantage, but the fact of missing them during the holidays was tough. And they've figured it out since then, but that was what they initially drew up. In the beginning, he was very much a stickler to it. So it was tough for a few years.
Another great example is the concept of you get them Christmas Eve and the other party gets them Christmas morning. So Christmas floats during your winter holiday break. So it could be like halfway through the first week of the holiday break. So you're both stuck wherever you're at to do that swap just for the Christmas. And then it also makes it so you can't travel. Like if you have family someplace else, you can't typically take the children then to another place unless you get agreement on that. So that's a tricky one. I tend to try to tell people to take the first week of the break and then the second week and flip flop those if it's a break. So one gets New Year's, one gets Christmas. Last year that didn't work out on my parenting plans, but it's because Christmas was on a Saturday. So looking out at those kinds of issues are important. And I'll tell you, it does suck when you don't have your kids on that particular holiday, but we've done some other episodes around creating different traditions, celebrating on different days, doing some other things, and it's and it's every other year kind of phenomenon that happens. So hopefully you can kind of it's tough on that 1 year, and then you look forward to the next year.
Creating new traditions is something that I was going to mention too. I think is super important. We talk about this a lot, and even the Thanksgiving, it's like, reach out to your family and say, hey, would you consider, I don't have the kids on Thanksgiving Day, but might have it on, Black Friday or another day. And can we have another Thanksgiving dinner and just, and celebrate it that way. So the children get to be a part of that. It doesn't have to be that date, in the diary is, very important. I celebrated, my daughter would go away for Christmas, the years that she would go away, I would just celebrate it before and say, we're going to have our own little Christmas. Doesn't matter. It's just a date in the diary. We have the tree, we've got the presents. We're going to wake up, have hot chocolate, do what we have to do, open the presents in our pajamas, and still do it, even though it's not Christmas Day. It's okay. The kids want the tradition and celebrate with you no matter what. It doesn't have to be. They don't understand the date in the diary anyway.
Yeah.
It's us that understands it. So, it's always a food for thought. And and especially if your family, your extended family or your friends can work with you around that too. Don't be afraid to ask them. It's like, listen, I don't have, my kids or kid, this Christmas. Would you be willing to celebrate it with me earlier or after again?
And is that an aspect that you bring into the co-parenting plan, like relatives? Do you ever bring that into it, or is it more just with like the two parents and how they're going to manage a time?
I have had a couple of people bring in grandparents into particularly when there's been like trips and holidays that the grandparents facilitate, and they sort of take the kids to have bonding trips with them. Then we'll bring sort of those in, but sometimes I don't really love to bring in third parties into an arrangement that, their circumstances may change, and, it just adds a layer of complexity. I tend to put the grandparents with that custodial parent kind of under the custodial parent's requests rather than the other party. So
if you guys have any questions, you can always reach out to us. We're going to put in the show notes ways to contact us as well. And we have a great co-parenting plan document that downloadable, which is amazing, really insightful and helpful on our website. And all of that will be in our show notes that you can go to, but check us out at www.split.fyi.com.
Bye, ladies. Always good seeing you.
Big love.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.